Welcome to the Non-Human and AI Identity podcast. By humans, for humans, no AI-generated content. Hi, I'm Lalit Choda, founder of the Non-Human Identity Management Group. On this brand new podcast show, I'll be hosting the leading voices shaping the future of non-human and agentic AI identity. We will also be sharing thought leadership insights from the latest events, including webinars, conferences, summits, and workshops focused on identity management and security. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Non-Human and AI Identity podcast. I'm really excited to have Martin Sandren, IAM Product Leader at IKEA, join me for this episode. Martin, please share a brief intro on your background and maybe share also something interesting that people may not know about you.
So my name is Martin Sandren, and I'm the product lead for identity and access at IKEA, which is the mother company in the IKEA group. And we do flat packages and round meatballs across the world. We also are in Sweden, we're the classical way to see if your relationship with your partner is good. You go to IKEA, and if you survive that, then clearly are destined for each other. I originally from Sweden, but I've lived across Germany, UK, the US, and are currently based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
Great. I must say I have a real affinity to IKEA. Again, something people may not know about me, but I fitted IKEA wardrobes into all of our bedrooms, and there's a lot of that furniture within our house as well. So if ever anyone needs help assembling IKEA, Mr NHI is your man. All right, so it's Mr NHI talking to Mr IKEA. Look, firstly, Martin, I really want to congratulate you this week. You received a special Lifetime Achievement Award for everything you've done across the industry, right, from an identity IAM standpoint. So, I have huge respect for you. You're one of the, I guess, influencers that I look up to. So really looking forward to this special session and hear your vast insights and thoughts around the broader IAM space. So many congrats.
Many thanks. It's of course always very nice to be recognized, and but I do think that the main thing is that we have managed to create a quite good community within the IAM, where it's very helpful and people are really taking the time to have the conversations and discuss and try to help each other with various problems and issues. And we also have quite a lot of people who engage in various parts of the community, and that could be that they help out with making sure that we can arrange conferences, or we have identity beers, social meetups, and that's a real strength of the community. So I'm very happy that we managed to get that in place.
Yeah, look, I can definitely attest to that myself, having kind of entered into the identity community, I guess, more formally about 18 months ago as I started the NHI group. You, for one, have warmly welcomed me and what we're trying to do in our mission. So much. You invited me with some of your colleagues to the lovely conference on IAM in kind of Netherlands, and even drove me to the amazing Rennen Zoo venue. So that was a great day to see real life non-human identities in the flesh.
Yes.
So look, before we get started with the main topic, which folks can actually see in the background that Martin has kindly got to create some excitement about this topic, we're going to start with Mr. NHI's Human Identity in the Hot Seat, where I'm going to fire 10 machine speed questions on IAM, non-human, and AI identities. So let's go, Martin. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are orgs taking NHI risks seriously enough?
I think it's really improving. NHI risks have increased as we move more and more into the cloud and now AI, of course. And that means that we need to move where we spend the vast majority of our time and effort. And previously they were spent on the human identities. And especially as AI matures more and more, I think we need to refocus and pivot to go towards the NHI.
Great. Are you a fan of vibe coding?
So my wife recently told me that I have to start vibe coding, so I have to get myself a more experience of this.
Does agentic AI security equal NHI security?
No, I would say that there's, of course, AI security would be agentic AI would be a subset of NHI security. There is still a lot of conventional service accounts and the entire cloud world that is quite far from agentic AI that we still have to handle.
Okay. Are organizations putting time to market ahead of security controls for AI agents?
I think this is mostly a cultural question and about a little bit about your company. And at the end of the day, we all serve the business purpose. So I think it's a varied question that some organizations do, some don't.
That's a great answer. Do we expect to see more breaches with AI?
So the attackers tends to attack where it's you get the most attack back for your bang, or it's the correct bang for your buck.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're necessarily going to see more breaches. I think we're going to see a lot of AI-based breaches where AI is part of the attack pattern. If the total volume is going up and down, that is, of course, very hard to know.
Okay. Given agentic AI means things aren't predictable, does that concern you?
Definitely. So this is something we need to. I think we have a few different areas. So of course, when it comes to things like ITDR or identity security, the non-predictability is quite okay because you don't necessarily need to have 100% uh, success rate. If you get to 50% in getting false positives, you're really good. Where I do see is decision making. So how do you make sure that your agentic AI doesn't take certain shortcuts and start um, leveraging protected categories, for example? That I see is a much bigger problem.
Great. Is the recent market activity involving identity vendors, acquisitions, investment a good thing for the industry?
Yes, at the end of the day, if I believe that a healthy market where new solutions are raised from startups and are being acquired by bigger companies is it's one of the ways that we can deliver better results at the end of the day to the enterprises.
Great. Will the AI agent digital workforce lead to mass unemployment?
Well, this far, it has never really happened. You know, you can go back to the Industrial Revolution. Every time we figure out something that means that we don't have to, like in the Middle Ages, usually 70, 80% of your workforce spent the time tilling in the fields. We don't do that today, but we still have other jobs to do. So I would find it unlikely that this time we will not find other things to do. Hopefully, we find better things and we can focus on those things instead of the relatively boring, reoccurring work.
Okay. Should human and non-human identities be managed and treated separately or together?
So there are a few differences in what you need to be successful in human and non-human identity management. You have a lot, especially when talking about non-ephemeral or ephemeral identities, just in time. So a lot of these things are different, and you still have the kind of the basic join and move leave flows, and of course humans can be authenticated in different ways. So I would still think that there is enough differences that it makes more sense to keep them apart than to try to do them in the same solutions.
Okay. And finally, are AI agents and agentic AI the same thing?
Um, Very good question. I actually have to read up on this before I can give you a good answer on this one.
Okay. We can always come back to that one.
Yeah.
All right. Look, I hope you enjoyed that, Martin. Very revealing. And it's a good segue into our main topic. You can't miss it, right? It's in the background, right? AI for IAM, IAM for AI. And what triggered this discussion, I saw Martin do a post on LinkedIn and it got me thinking, let's launch a poll. So we'll share that in a minute, the results of that poll. But thanks, Martin, for helping get that dialogue going. Look, firstly, given you've been on the practitioner side of the fence, like myself, for 25 years, I'm just very keen to get your insights first, right, on how you feel kind of the NHI problem is currently being tackled within organizations, and then also, how you see kind of AI and agentic AI being currently used or looked at in terms of use cases within organizations. Just share some initial thoughts.
So I think on the NHI problem, it's basically a lot of it is that we as a industry are realizing that although the conventional PAM approach, it's really useful and really solves some very critical problems. It is when you talk about the more cloud-based, for example, solutions, you do see that the PAM 2.0 has a lot of advantages, primarily because of trad PAM was a way to solve problems in a kind of very structured environment like financial institutions, where you needed to make sure that you knew exactly who had access
Mm,
what at any given time, and you wanted to make sure that try handle things like insider threats and similar. So TradPAM definitely had its role and definitely still has its role in many organizations. But what you do also see is that no matter how diligent you work, no matter how hard you work, it is really hard to roll out TradPAM across a very large amount of target systems. And what you also see is that the TradPAM can be challenged when it comes to supporting all the customizations and special things that teams have used to do with their PAM accounts. So the ability for kind of PAM 2.0 with the just-in-time provisioning of access, zero standing privilege,
mm,
and just the kind of the putting the pyramid on its head that you have a few very highly privileged accounts that you can then use to create instead of vaulting a very large amount of, of service accounts.
mm,
It's just from a productivity, being able to deliver value to the organization, just not having the classical challenge that you build a great PAM system and then you onboard 10, 20, perhaps 30 applications. And then you kind of, because of the cost per implementation, you kind of get stuck there. I do think that that is a great improvement. And overall, the setup has really helped us on improving the way we handle um, data and how we can deliver value to the organizations.
So from an AI and agentic standpoint, keen to understand, given your practitioner background, how are you seeing organizations now starting to use AI and agentic AI within their organizations? What kind of use cases are they starting to tackle at the moment?
So I think there's a number of different very interesting use cases. So one part where we really see the value is in identity security and in intrusion detection flows. And that is basically being able to handle these very complex cases where you want to discover an attacker or you have a sneaking suspicion that there's an identity compromise. And here, a well-trained AI is a really good approach. You do need to make sure that you can teach the agents what is the difference between good and bad. For example, you need to tell them that, okay, these are internal networks and these are external networks. So if the user comes from an internal network, a known network, it's less likely that they've been compromised than if they come from, let's say, certain countries in the world that are known for having lots of attackers and are also we don't really have any operations there, so it's unlikely that someone has a legitimate reason to be there. So those kind of use cases, and then you have things like, for example, we are leveraging it for drones. So we, in a lot of um, warehouses. You have these high warehouses where you have, of course, a lot of pallets with stuff. And historically, you have to send someone up there to verify that what you think is in a specific slot is actually there, because sometimes people make mistakes.
Yeah.
So being able to use drones to send them out to fly around and scan all of this is a huge advantage, because both it takes a lot of less time from your employees, they can do more valuable things, and it's also quite dangerous to do this. So not having to send out your employees on dangerous missions that are also very time consuming is really advantageous.
Yeah.
So you do see those kind of use cases. And of course, you see things like customer service with all the bots that you also can leverage. Another thing where I think is still a little bit, there's still learning around is to see how can I make my staff more efficient. So when you get a problem in, let's say that you're talking about this is done in AI, in IAM, for example, we have done some testing, and I know a lot of other firms have done testing to see that a properly trained AI that has access to the latest documentation for the systems you have, and potentially also connection, of course, to see exactly what you have in your system. That's a little bit more sensitive, so there you have to do the right things. Can really increase the productivity of the engineers a lot. And that is, of course, helpful, because this is one of the hard parts, is to have enough engineers available to solve all the business problems that the
Mm.
business creates.
Okay, look, that's really fascinating, Martin. Kind of good food for thought there. Look, now let's kind of get to the heart of today's discussion and your background, image AI for IAM, IAM for AI. Like I said, when you posted about this, it triggered me to kind of take advantage of your post and actually launch a survey on LinkedIn where I asked that question, right? What do you think is more important, AI for IAM or IAM for AI? Just kind of blown away by kind of the voting. We had nearly 250 people vote, so clearly a topic of interest to many. Now, 22% said they think actually AI for IAM is more important, and then 78% said IAM for AI is more important. Now, first, I'll ask you, of the two, if you had to pick one, which one would you pick?
So it's basically about how we best support the business, and the business is going to find lots and lots and lots of different use cases for AI. So if we don't have IAM for AI, they will do what the best they can, and most likely they will do a lot of our provisioning of access, and we will have challenges with agents that we don't know who they belong to.
Mm,
When we have intrusions, we have to figure out, you know, these agents here that potentially got taken over by the attackers. How do we make sure that we contain the intrusions and kick out the attackers? Now, so IAM for AI is going to be really, really critical to be successful in the mission of supporting the business, to get those better life for the many, which is our
mm,
mission at IKEA. And no matter what your mission is, you're going to have AI, and you then need to manage it. Now, AI for IAM, it's definitely true that there's certain things we can do that we know AI is really good at. So, for example, it's really good at ITDR and identity security and
mm,
those things. So of course, not having that means that I have to spend more of my limited engineering time. My engineers will have to spend time at doing that work instead of being able to do more high value work. But if I have to choose one, then IAM for AI is in most cases the critical one. Of course, by leveraging AI for IAM, I can free up resources. I can start putting together a really
mm.
strong service offering in the IAM for AI. That's how I feel the connection between them.
Yeah, look, I would agree, and I think obviously that was the majority. So look, why don't we first deep dive a little bit into AI for IAM. You also touched on one or two examples like ITDR. But where else do you think AI can transform kind of the IAM? kind of processes?
So we do see some really good outcomes across the board on leveraging AI to do onboarding in IGA systems. So one of the challenges that you have is that it's always been quite time consuming and effort consuming to onboard applications into IGA systems. It involves going out and asking people, how does provisioning work in your application? What would you like to have?
Oh,
And by leveraging AI, you can kind of either have the asker being an AI instead of a business analyst, or you could basically sit somewhere in the network or on the hosts and go like and sniff the traffic and make sense of it, and then be able to do this, at least get that first initial kind of suggestion on the table, and then you still probably need to verify it, but it can save you quite a lot of time. So if I look at the numbers coming out of both firms that do this, as well as the SI firms that tries to increase the productivity, you can see like 70-80% productivity gain compared to the manual. So that's a huge advantage,
oh.
of course.
What about the other side of JML, right? Sort of, recertification, the sort of lever stuff. To me, that seems like an obvious place where because everybody loves to hate kind of recertification and dealing with kind of orphaned privileges. Do you think that's another area
Yeah,
of
so
benefit?
definitely here, of course, you have a bit of the challenge that you have to, depending on why you use certification. So in certain business, use certification to keep the kind of the spread of of entities or privileges down. In that case, the AI is supported, so I can tell you, okay, here instead of asking someone to kind of validate 300 entitlements, you can say, okay, these 30 are probably the ones that you need to focus on because these 100 they are fine, they are the same as the peer group for the
Yeah,
user, nothing reason. But these 30 here, they look very weird.
yeah,
Perhaps you should
outliers.
take a
Yeah,
look. And if you are in a highly regulated environment, that may not be enough. But if you're not in highly regulated, then it could be a very interesting uh, way to get that kind of work done. Likewise, it seems that AIs are quite good at describing things. So like you might have a lot of groups or other entitlements. You can leverage AI to get at least an initial idea of what they actually are about. And then in most cases, you probably want a human to run through them. But again, if the human can do 10 groups in an hour compared to three with total manual and hopefully be less bored as well, that's a
yeah.
huge win. Suddenly things that really weren't financially viable becomes viable.
What about things like kind of used to be many years ago, the holy grail, right? Like role-based access control. Typically we have very fine-grained entitlements, both at a business entitlement and an infrastructure entitlement level, being able to kind of reverse engineer, understand, what is really the roles and the outliers and kind of maybe re-engineer so, you can get to that RBAC type model. Is that another area where you see kind of some improvements?
It's definitely a very interesting area, and that's a very interesting area in the sense that there was a lot of analytics. I remember the big role explosion when the role mining that came back
Mm.
in 2006, 2007. It then kind of disappeared. I do think that there is quite a lot of things that could be done there to improve the roles, to not having just human analysis on it, but the AI is doing the first cut on it.
Okay, and then moving on to like my favorite topic, NHIs. How do you see AI helping, tackle some of the challenges that we have today around kind of NHIs, maybe more on the kind of legacy, static kind of credentials and all the risks we have around that versus kind of the more kind of modern IAM ephemeral stuff. Do you think AI is going to be able to help in that space as well?
So definitely to be able to do basically the hygiene part. One of the hardest part when I talk about classical kind of NHI is just hygiene.
Mm.
That you have to have someone there. If you don't constantly clean it, it's always going to kind of pick up with who should be who who is the owner of this service account. Well, the person who owned it left. So then it kind of either it had no owner or it kind of started walking up the chain, and suddenly you have a VP that has 500 accounts associated with them. Here, really, an AI could perhaps go in and say that, okay, 400 of those, I can find a logical owner that is not the VP, and then we'll have to deal with the last 20% manually. But again, it's all about productivity. It's all about being able to do things that was just not financially viable before the age of AI.
Yeah, look, my take is, the hygiene, the orphaned accounts, taking a risk on blowing away an account, that could affect production. I think, the ability for, AI to take all that data, understand it, apply context, look at, activity,
Mm.
and kind of just bring all the different data sets
Yeah,
together to, apply the kind of logic you would as a human,
yeah,
around making that kind of decision. I think that could be transformative because look, the reality is most people have massive NHI issues. The chances that they're going to be able to fix all those things, you've got to take a bit of a balanced approach, right? Go after the highest risks, right? While you
yeah,
start working on the more strategic path, are you going to be able to fix all your hard-coded credentials, move everything into a vol rotate?
yeah.
Look, I've done that. I've been there, at a financial org, and it's a monster program. So I think, AI helping kind of, as you said, create that productivity, help manage the risk while you move on to kind of the more strategic is the benefit we could hopefully
Yeah,
see.
and I think one important part here is to realize to treat your AIs a little bit like very ambitious and very enthusiastic junior junior interns. So I know there was one case where someone had asked an AI to optimize the query time in a database, and the AI quickly realized that one important factor is the size of the database. So if I drop 90% of database records, my speed will increase tremendously. So I'll do that. So one problem when you have it AI is that it has a tendency to not kind of apply common sense. Now,
Yeah,
that is sometimes true for junior interns as well, but uh, I think a lot of these things are basically that you need to kind of figure out how to set boundaries, both logically as well as with access parts, and not just let them roam freely.
right. All right, look, now let's get to the interesting thing, and you're covering the bear now. That's IAM for AI. That's better.
Yeah,
Um, look, how do you, well, let's just cut to the chase. Where does IAM need to evolve? Right, we obviously before said IAM, IGA,
yeah,
PAM was not fit for purpose for the NHI use case, right? The last couple of years.
yeah,
But clearly AI is going to put a much different challenge on how we do IAM, right? More broadly now for those
yeah.
NHIs, including, agentic. So where do you think kind of IAM 1.0, 2.0 needs to
Yeah.
evolve to support, the AI era?
So I think that it's a little bit of kind of starting in TradPAM, because a lot of what you do is privileged access management for agents. They, you know, basically most agents start with the kind of the access that you have delegated to it, but in many cases you need privileged access to be able to do the work. So if you use TradPAM for agents, I think that's a bad idea. But essentially, you can take a look and see, okay, what have we learned how to improve our way of working that supported the more PAM 2.0? So that you get kind of just in time, so zero standing privileges, just in time access to what you need, so policy based. So the policies can kind of be written in a way that they give general guidance.
Mm.
And you can make sure that you don't have more access than what you need to do your job. And then of course, there's a lot of technical parts to this, like Spiffy, for example, to be able to give out just the amount of access that when the job start up, and then be able to remove it. And also the entire this kind of thinking around the SSF, CAPE, etc. That you don't just give out a very highly privileged service account happily to the AI agents and say, here you go, you will have this forever, but give out the right amount of access when they need it in according to policy. And then you need to, of course, look at how you tweak your policies to make sure that you're as tight as you need to be to balance flexibility and operation efficiency versus over provisioning of entitlements on the other hand.
So look, if you were to give some advice to an organization around kind of building that capabilities, like organizations need to step back and think about kind of their overall strategy, their architecture, to kind of make sure it can work to model some of those use cases you've described. Is there a core infrastructural element that needs to be tackled? Or is this something where, there's something already off the shelf without necessarily naming names? Do we have solutions today that are really ready to tackle kind of the agentic AI era? Or is it like NHIs were a few years ago where it's we're at the early stage of the maturity curve and we've got a long way to go. What are your thoughts?
I think that so the first part is to just get track, establish your registry, which can be everything from a glorified spreadsheet really, but some form of a registry for your agentic AI NHI, and then start out with the scanning to see which agents are you not in control of, or you can of course say that, well, in our company no one makes any mistakes, everyone does what they're supposed to, and then you will probably see that just like with shadow IT that probably that's going to be true for 95%, but there's always going to be people who perhaps takes a little bit too many shortcuts. And then you come to the kind of the fine-grained access management. And if you look at this is something that's been around, I been doing implementation of fine-grained at least since 2008, and a lot of the players that were there then are still there. Now, of course, the products have been much refined, so they were very kind of time-consuming to configure and execute back then. So a lot of the kind of the governance parts is available today, I would say. Once you get to that kind of third state in the maturity life cycle. There is what we also do see is that it's been really a kind of an explosion of productivity. In the historical way that we did IAM products was that you had a product lead whose job it was to define the development roadmap for a specific product. And usually they had 12 to 24 months of pipeline where they've committed to deliver that. Which meant that if you had a good idea today, first it takes 12 to first you have to go and convince the product lead that, hey, you should really support this. And they said, yes, okay, I will do it, but I will have to wait 12, 24 months until I get the slot to do it. And then once it's kind of started developing, then it took like, say 2 to 12 months to develop it and test it, have it ready. And then you handed it out and said, okay, here's a feature that's available. And then it has to be installed on your local systems. Again, somewhere from a few weeks to a few months to a few years before we had it upgraded. And then you had to get the professional services or engineers to configure it. That could take another weeks, months, years. So the classical life cycle from hey, wouldn't it be nice if to I have a working system up and running in my enterprise could easily be 3-4 years. Not uncommon by any means. While now that we move to, if you're able to move to a more kind of agile platform in the cloud, you have all of these concepts of public preview and first private preview and public preview to speak Microsoft language, but most vendors have a similar language, where you can kind of really go and say, well, this would be a good idea, and then in a few months' time, you might have something that is available that you can use in a private preview, and then you can, of course, then there's risk that it's not going to be supported forever, because it might be that it's either technically not really, a dead end, or it might be a
Mm.
commercially dead end, or for some other reason. But at least you can see the much faster turnaround, especially in the big platforms. And that's a huge change to what it used to be back, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, look, that's definitely fascinating how that's going to transform the general sort of SDLC development life cycles, being more productive, more nimble.
Yeah.
But when we think about kind of how IAM is going to support like AI agents, agentic AI, like what do you think are the biggest gaps we have today, kind of from a standards, capability, solutioning standpoint that we'll need kind of all the big orgs, the startups, like, where do we need to sort of focus the energies, right, to be able to deal with the fact that, as predictions say, right, we're going to have millions, billions of these digital workforces. Some organizations are already saying I've got 20,000 digital, employees alongside my 50,000, you know,
Yeah.
human employees. Um, what are the biggest IM challenges that we need to still kind of tackle to support this new agentic AI sort of digital workforce?
So I think it's basically principles that we go back to. So we need to figure out a way how to give, least privilege and zero standing privilege. And in practice, in an enterprise, it's not so much least privilege. So, vaguely reasonable privileges most of the time. Sometimes, at least it feels like that when you when your reality sets in. Um, but in general, that principle, it needs to be there. So you shouldn't be giving more access than what's needed to do the job. Um, that is one part of it. And there, of course, you have things like Outsen, who really has kind of matured, and it's a bit of a case of, a nice standard that found out the problem it was actually meant to support. Outsen has been one of these, a little bit like a standard that is a great thought, but what do we really use it for? But now
Mm,
you can see it clearly that's needed. You have things like Spiffy, so that you avoid, handing out these long-lived uh, identities that lives forever. Certificates, of course, you usually have a lifetime, but the risk is that you use things like the OAuth username secrets that are basically never rotated, or at least
mm,
rotated, 2 to 3 years. So there you have things like Spiffy, and you have also on the ability to communicate cross boundaries about risk that you have in SSF, uh, and the ability to continuously evaluate your risk in your sessions with CAPE, other really useful standards. So these are the things I do see as the main things we need to get in place. But also the ability to figure out, what is the business purpose of these agents, and how do you control what is actually still needed by what's actually used and what is just sitting there, is something that there's not a huge amount of standards around that.
mm. And what about the fact that obviously there's multiple use cases, right? When we think of kind of agentic AI, humans using the agents,
Yeah,
agents talking to agents, agents with human in the loop, right? Where maybe some decisions need to be made.
yeah,
And then obviously agents maybe autonomously creating identities because they now decide they need to connect to something new that they didn't do
yeah.
before. Um, again, I don't know whether there's anything out there kind of that helps us model that type of stuff, put those kind of policies in place. Clearly we need to get a sort of real-time intent context-based, you know, authentication and authorization. But do we really have kind of the models, the solutions out there today to really properly model that and kind of govern it, kind of end to end? I don't think we do, but obviously you're probably closer to
No,
the.
I think that you're probably correct. That especially talking about a massive agent to agent, where just like the cases where you use the the agents are operating in its own kind of zone. The more generalized one is that still needs work. The delegation part where you delegate and the agents help you with initial draft of something, that I think is we're getting a good understanding of what is needed there. But the massive agent to agent organizations, I think that still needs quite a lot of basically just understanding what the implications and how do you handle this.
Yeah, look, I think agentic kind of just requires so much more broader thought in terms of security, not just from a identity standpoint. There's many other risks you need to think about. I was fortunate enough to be at the OWASP Top 10 agentic applications launch, and they were saying, look, in heavily regulated environments, you need to be able to prove, what your tools of, your processes are doing, obviously all your standard test cases and kind of
Yeah,
prove it was designed to do exactly what it's done on the tin. But agentic turns that on its head, right? Because it's not by its nature going to be, predictive anymore, right?
yeah,
It's going to be, you know, non-predictive, right? And autonomous. So, how do you then prove, an agent, is doing what it was designed to do, right? What are the guardrails?
yeah,
Like a human, has policies and standards that you need to follow, and you don't always do that, right? And clearly agents can as well. So yes, there's clearly a lot of things we need to think about from just an overall governance standpoint. Um, just
yeah, and also applying kind of basic um, logic and basic judgment. So I remember a few years ago I got a question about they wanted to use um, at that time it was a little bit before the time of the rise of the agentic AI. But basically what they wanted to do was to be able to parse the error, the incidents coming in through a standard ticketing system. And the problem they discovered was that a lot of these tickets was about the fact that we had two different systems and that we were supposed to have a job that copied data between the systems, but that job stopped working every now and then. So what the team wanted to do was instead of writing a good agent that looked at the copying agent, just kind of say, hey, are you awake? And then, oh, you're not awake, then wake up, do this. They thought that, well, why don't we write an AI agent that listens to the tickets, and when they say that this doesn't work, then you just rerun that transaction, which in the end basically meant that our end users became very, very expensive monitoring agents. Uh, so you kind of need sometimes to take a step back and say, okay, identity AI might not be the solution to all problems. Perhaps there's a simpler root problem we can solve that doesn't involve, spending that our poor end users would have to have problems and then have to raise tickets to get things working.
Yeah, like a lot of food for thought. Look, as we start to wrap up, what is the one thing that sort of keeps you up at night about the whole agentic AI challenge?
So I think it is primarily people who try to do the right thing and didn't really realize the complexity of the enterprise. Because one thing is that if you have ever worked in a large enterprise that has been there for decades,
Mm.
you know that there's lots of ways to do things that will be really catastrophic in the long run. Short term, they look great, solves lots of problems, but long term, that will be really catastrophic. And the problem is that if you kind of And likewise, documentation, we are not so good at writing good documentation. So in many cases, if you look at a big, complex enterprise, you will have documentation that is outdated. That's the best documentation. Then you have documentation that is completely wrong. And then potentially you have correct documentation, but it's quite uncommon. And it's also not that it's always is trivial to understand how you should read the documentation to make it actually right. So normally the thing is that systems are so complex that normal humans they don't really kind of try to figure out the ways around and things. But AIs are very good at that. So you might have cases where the AI told me to do X and I did X and it worked great. And then it kind of, you accumulate over days, weeks, months, a huge problem that then explodes at some point.
Yeah, in
That's
terms of the downstream implications
Yeah,
of,
a tech debt basically that you just
uh,
accumulate. So instead of solving the root cause, you kind of just walk around it, and then the root cause becomes bigger and bigger, bigger, and then at some point it blows up.
okay, look, I think we're now at the end of our great discussion. Thanks, Martin, for joining Mr NHI on our Non-Human and
So
AI Identity podcast show. Are there any closing thoughts or any final recommendations, guidance you would share with the audience and organizations around
I
what
think
we've
if you're
discussed?
interested in these topics, do reach out to your local community. There's quite a lot of conferences that discusses this, and even if you are on a budget, uh, you have a budget challenge. For example, we have the identity beer that runs across Europe and actually across the globe to a certain degree. Do reach out to your local community, join ID Pro. There is quite a lot of knowledge there, and be part of the conversation and learn more things. And that's the best way to build up your own knowledge.
Great, that's fantastic advice. And I think you've also, in a nutshell, described our mission at the NHI Management Group, which is all about education, evangelization, and kind of bringing the community together. So, look, really enjoyed this episode. Um, if folks want to get in touch, I'm assuming just find you on LinkedIn or something, or how would you recommend
That's
they?
probably the best way to find me,
All right.
or come to me, or visit some of the conferences or other ways.
Yeah, well, we can't miss you on LinkedIn. I think you're probably as prolific a poster as I am on LinkedIn. We'll have to do a competition on who posts the most
Yeah.
every year. All right, look, we've got some more great speakers coming up in the show. If you want to learn more, as you said, look at what Martin's doing. I would definitely recommend following him. He's always posting great insights and thought leadership views from across the industry, but also visit nhimg.org, where we have the most comprehensive knowledge center on NHIs and Agentic, over 2,000 posts. I guess in terms of education, we've also launched our NHI Foundation Level training course that Martin has also recently taken. Closing, I think the biggest challenge I see, when we asked the question about do we think there's going to be mass unemployment? I think the biggest challenge we got now is the huge skill shortage that we have in the industry around identity folks that can deal with the challenges that are coming, having more people that are proficient with just AI, prompt engineering, vibe coding. Um, so I think training and education and using the community is a key part of us being successful in the AI era. All right, Martin, thanks very much.
Thank
Great
you very
chatting
much,
with
and
you, and see you soon.